My name is Dr. Moses Sabusi, the Chair of Behavioral Sciences Institute in Al Ain Hospital. I will be the moderator, inshallah, for the afternoon session. The session is titled Experience in Accreditation Perspectives and Lessons. The first presentation, it will be by Dr. Mohammed Al-Houqani, and the co-speaker will be Dr. Manal Al-Halabi. طبعا دكتور محمد غني عن التعريف ما شاء الله عليه. He is the Secretary General of the National Institute for Health Specialties, and which is the accrediting body, accrediting and certifying body for the postgraduate clinical training programs in the UAE. Dr. Al-Houqani is an associate professor at the UAE University. As well, he's a consultant in internal medicine, respirology, and sleep medicine. Together with Dr. Mohammed, Dr. Manal Al-Halabi will be the co-speaker. Dr. Manal, she is the Dean and Professor of Pediatric Dentistry, Hamdan bin Mohammed College of Dental Medicine, Mohammed bin Rashid University of Medicine and Health Sciences. Also, she's holding, mashallah, her bio is really excellent. Also, she's holding academic position at Boston University and the University of Maryland. Dr. Manal, she received her postgraduate training in pediatric dentistry, as well Master of Oral Biology from University of Maryland, Baltimore, USA, and she's also certified by the American Board of Pediatric Dentistry. So, both Dr. Mohammed and Dr. Manal will be presenting about the NIHS experience.
Shukran, Dr. Mose. I'd like to make sure that my voice is clear, because we have Zoom and some of them are no. And now, okay, excellent. Well, thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed the first day session and enjoyed the lunch. And hi also for our attendees virtually, and we have a very good number who will be following us, and they are active asking questions. So for the next 10 minutes, I'll take only 10 minutes, you can start counting. I'll be talking about the NIHS experience in accreditation. So to start with, the accreditation, which is the process in which quality of training program is assessed by an external body using a set of standards. What we learned today so far, and I hope Dr. Al-Fika here, we learned that if you got accredited and you do follow the standards, that would reflect into your education quality and also to your outcomes and the health of the workforce. And so very important to set the right standards. And I'll be talking about how did we set our accreditation standards, and then the accreditation system overall. So to start with is how did we put together the NIHS accreditation standard? We have 36 scientific committees, medical, surgical, dental, and nursing. And we decided that we should not reinvent the wheel. We should not start from scratch and develop something that has not been tested before. So it was a journey looking at different experience of Royal College of Physicians, ACDME, Saudi, Arab boys, and we learned from all of them. And what we found, which was very well closer to our culture, the experience that has been tested was with the medical, the ACDME, with the dental, the CODA, with the nursing, the American College of Nursing. So there are things that we can start looking at. And then we contextualize it to our local practice, where sometimes the definition of a life coalition, some of the competencies, or maybe some of the requirement that does not fit our standards. And we build on it. Luckily, we benefited from the residency experience in the UAE. We have programs that have been here for the last 20 years. We have excellence also stakeholders. So for every committee, average of 8 consultants on that specialty from across the country. And whatever they come up with, it has to go to the Council of Scientific Affairs to approve. So we ended up with institutional accreditation requirement, common program requirement, and then specialty specific requirements. These are the specialty that has been approved and ready. And as you see, they're different, all specialty, most of the clinical, I would say medical specialty are there. We have also another 5 dental and nursing campuses. And a good number of nurses are coming today for a special workshop in the afternoon. So the institution accreditation and the requirements, we're looking at 5 domains. Looking at the governance structure, and this is part of the discussion that we had. How does the government should be? Who's the DIO? To whom he's reporting? What authority the DIO has? Who's funding the institution? Okay? We're looking at the training environments, including the training rooms, the on-call rooms, the residents, fellow trainees, faculty, and the protected time, and the ratio also, the faculty to residents ratio. And then we'd like to see a continuous improvement and knowledge. Now, at the level of the program and specialty, we, in addition to what I mentioned, we look at the residence appointments, educational program, the curriculum, the scholarly activity we highly encourage, residence evaluation and promotions, the residence supervision, duty hour, and today we heard a lot about the CCC committee and the program evaluation committee. We use the same terminology so that we're not confusing the existing program accredited by ACGMB. We talk the same language so that when we attend workshops like this, seminars, we learn from each other, we share the experience. We have all what I just mentioned to you on our e-services, and maybe if you allow me for a few seconds, you click on it. No, oops, no, it should work. Okay, so we have videos demonstrating all the e-services that we have, and you can watch. You click down. You have also a card code. Yes. Okay. That's okay. So these are the rubrics and the application forms. Many of you went through it. I know the journey. The self-assessment, which clearly can help you to know whether you're meeting the requirement or not. For all the requirements there, it's like a rubrics. Thank you. So your applications goes through 4 stages. You apply online, it goes to the NIHS review team. And I have excellent teams who will go through it, through every requirement, looking at the evidence. And most of the time, I would say the delay on this, on the accreditation cycle comes from missing documents or newly applying institution who first time is building up their own policies and procedures related to the clinical competency or program evaluations committee. So it takes time, and we're coaching you, and we work with you on this process, which is number 2. Once the application is ready, then we call up the surveyors, and we have a very good number of surveyors who were well trained, as well as coached through their career to evaluate the institution. And once that report comes, it's not the decision of the surveyors, not even the Secretary General. It goes to a central accreditation committee, which has representative of all stakeholders. They're all into medical education, And it's really exciting every time to listen to them. And you looking at every application, asking all the detailed question about every citation to come up with a decision. A decision that could be to grant institutional accreditation or program accreditation, or maybe a conditional. And we do have examples of conditional accreditation. Most of the time in a way, it's a 1-year duration, or not to grant accreditation. And we also have examples of some programs, and we're not a policeman. We're there just to help you to ensure that you do have a plan to improve your program for a better experience of your trainees, okay? And what we're doing now also, we're building up our accreditation portal, which will be fully automated. From the applications to the surveyors, to the central accreditation committee, to maintenance of accreditation with a survey for the institution program, faculty, residents, and also building up the EPA and milestones portal. Like also here, this is a very good opportunity to announce the registration of accreditation surveyors. Yes, we do have 110, but we're looking for more. So we will have a workshop today on surveyors. And if you'd like to apply at the end of the event, please visit our website. Thank you. And I'd like to invite Dr. Manal. Dr. Manal, she's the Dean of Dental School. And why I choose Dr. Manal, because it's a different experience. We asked her with her team to draft the pediatrics dentistry residency requirement, which is something new to many of us. It's not like in the ACGME. And she put it together, and we utilize the same framework with the 5 domains there, but in a dental program. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. And I would like to first start by thanking Dr. Muhammad and the NIHS for actually giving us the opportunity in the dental profession to be a part of this extraordinary experience. And in fact, this was a very, very enriching experience for us moving forward. What I'm going to do, it won't be long, because mashallah, Dr. Muhammad went over, the process, and of course the process is similar to, whether it's dental, medical, nursing, it's all similar. But I wanted to share with you some of the experiences or what we did in a very, very summarized way. So, of course, as we have heard since the morning, the purpose of this setup of guidelines is a service to the public and to the dental profession to develop and implement the program requirements to assure quality. Of course, first promote, and then monitor the continuous quality of these programs. In my opinion, and I hope that you would agree with me, that the way NIHS approached the dental accreditation was a very progressive approach, and I'm going to explain to you why this is actually. We have in dentistry, it's a little bit actually there is a difference when it comes to the postgraduate dental education or the specialty dental training in dentistry. There's a bit of a difference. It's a little bit different from the medical specialty training. There are 2 models. One model is the hospital-based residency, similar to the medical training, and The other model actually, which is a very common model, especially in North America, is the accreditation of academic clinical programs. The programs, most of the dental postgraduate specialty dental programs belong to universities. They don't belong to hospitals, and these programs get accredited as part of the academic program. And in fact, currently with the CEA, we actually have the same model. I mean, our clinical dental specialty programs are now accredited by CEA. So it was, the NIHS, in its capacity as moving forward, hopefully the entity that will promote the quality would actually can take this forward. And this has actually first of all, that would promote and monitor the continuous quality. It also, of course, would serve the needs of the dental workforce in the UAE. In addition to that, with academic programs, there's always the advantage of high quality oral health research, which is actually needed in the currently in the UAE strategic as a strategic requirement moving forward. This is just a summary, about the dental residency programs in North America, and I just put an example as this is my area of expertise, pediatric dentistry. And in fact, other programs have less dependency on hospital-based programs and more academic, but it's almost a 50-50 split between academic programs and hospital-based training, similar clinical training, more didactic components when it comes to university-based training, and of course, higher research requirements when it comes to university-based training. Of course, this is also this same model is followed in the region. Recently the Saudi Commission for Health Specialties has actually started allowing graduates of the master's and PhD program in Saudi universities to apply for the Saudi board accreditation. So moving forward, after I gave you a brief idea of how what the vision was, we moved forward in 5 different specialty committees to set the guidelines, and our guidelines actually followed the same NIHS defined competencies of that we have been discussing since the morning. And in addition to that, when it came to specialty specific guidelines, we actually, our main source of guidelines was the Commission on Dental Accreditation, or CODA in short, as part of the American Dental Ethics Coalition. CODA was established in 1975. It's recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as an independent, autonomous organization that accredits all the dental programs, the dental education programs inside the U.S., as well as the postgraduate dental programs in the U.S. They also have an international, accreditation only for undergraduate dental programs. We don't accredit postgraduate dental programs. Now, of course, these were our guidelines, but we actually wanted to make sure that these guidelines, to us, this was like the minimum guidelines. We wanted to make sure that these guidelines would work for the UAE, would work for the quality of what we want to happen. There were additional things that we actually added to the CODA guidelines. Just give you some examples. We actually went as this This is not set in the guidelines of CODA, but we set a minimum for faculty-student ratio. Some clinical requirements, clinical procedural requirements were set also for some specialties. We also, required an associate program director when the number of residents is above 15. And we also increased the minimum duration of programs. On average, the minimum duration of programs was increased about a year, because we wanted to make sure that these specialists are well trained and worthy of, being eligible to take the Emirati board. And we also had in all our 5 specialty guidelines we added the requirement to design, complete, and submit a research project, which we would like it to be relevant to the specialty and hopefully locally relevant research. Of course, we complied with all the requirements of the committees of the NIHS. And as I said, the programs are all clinical competency based. We don't work by the number of procedures, but in addition to the assertion of clinical competency, we had some programs such as periodontology and prosthodontics. They actually opted for specifying minimum numbers of procedures or cases. Some programs just chose, they were selected about some specific minimally required numbers for certain procedures. For example, in endodontics, where they required a specific number of surgical cases. In pediatric dentistry, we required a specific number of cases treated under oral sedation and general anesthesia. In addition to the specialty, this was also, as the document mentioned in the morning, there was a committee that put the guidelines for the dental internship program, and these guidelines were based on the NIHS medical internship guidelines, with, of course, modifications that are appropriate for dentistry. And the special thing that also Sir Muhammad mentioned, that these guidelines were applicable to private dental clinics. So hopefully, now, and I think there's already some established partnership to start private dental clinics internship. It is normal, of course, we don't work as many hours as the medical professionals. We actually adjusted the number of hours to suit the dental training. No course for dental interest. This is my last slide. I just wanted to thank my colleagues, of course, many people with wonderful work into this. My colleagues, Sir Nabil Mood and Dr. Muhammad Jamal, Professor Ahmed Al-Naima, Professor Mu'min Atiyah, and Dr. Musa Abu Zaide, the chairs of the committees, as well as all the wonderful members of the committees, the dental committees, started something very, very special in the UAE and the region. Thank you very much. And
very much, Dr. Emirati. Yes, so the next presentation is by Dr. James Abiki. He's the conference co-chair, and he will, and also the Chief Executive Officer of the ACGN UNI, and he will be presenting the ACGN experience.
Okay, thank you. So after lunch, hopefully this afternoon, if you've had some caffeine, I'll stay awake. What I'd like to do now is provide a bit of an overview of ACGNI, but in a different way than usually, because you all know more or less what we do. So what my aim in the next 20 minutes or so is to describe how ACGMEI has learned from our engagement with our partners across the world. We've been in UAE, specifically in Abu Dhabi, for quite some time now, quite a number of years. And that partnership, as well as the partnership with our other institutions across the world, is bi-directional, right? It's a bi-directional learning process. So the interactions that we have in the process of doing the accreditation, in the process of delivering education, in the process of networking, informs us about how to do things better as ACGMEI, which is what we want to do. So it's not just about process improvement for programs, but it's process improvement for us. So that's sort of my angle of describing describing ACGMEI in the next few minutes. And also providing you not so much what is present, but give you a sense of what we see as the future state. So first lesson, and I have 10 lessons that we've learned. First lesson is it's important to be guided by mission and values. As an organization, medical education organization, we're not a business, we're a medical education organization, an accreditor that's driven by mission values. And so our mission is to improve healthcare by assessing and advancing the quality of resident physician education through accreditation. It's really about improving health. The method we do it is by having an impact on one aspect of the healthcare environment, but it's only one aspect. But it's the part that we are focused on. We're going to have a list of values, and I'm not going to read through all the values, but most of these I think are fairly non-controversial values. But it's important for an organization to have a value statement. I will point to the last one: cultural sensitivity and consideration of the local environment. That's something that's important for ACGM International. Most of the other values actually are very similar, if not identical, to the ACGM values US. And we have this balance of what we do, what we call the assurance function, which is the traditional accreditation functions of ensuring that you're meeting minimum standards, and the quality improvement function, which is arguably at this point in time even more important once you have an established program. And these principles, if you always focus on your mission and values, it will guide you through your engagement of institutions across the world, scope of what you do, so you don't overstep your boundaries, underperform the limits of flexibility, conflict resolution, and the whole accreditation process. So the mission is important. And if you really looked at that mission, I bet if you look at the mission of your hospital, the mission of the NHS, the mission of the Saudi Commission, they read probably very similarly, right? I mean, we're interested in improving healthcare. So there's a common element to the mission across like-minded organizations. Lesson number 2, it's important to define what you are not. So we have a scope of what work that we do, but we realize we're not an accreditor for all. We don't fit everywhere. We have no intention to try to do that. You could argue, if you want to get really philosophical about it, you could argue whether there's a role for a global accreditor at all, or whether accreditation should be a very local function. We think there's a role for it, but it's not for every place or institution. We're not consultants, and we're not a business. We're not. There's actually different ways you can get consulting with regard to medical education. We're not a certified body, for better or worse. Our system, the framework of our accreditation system is built on the premise that certifying is more local or regional, and that our system dovetails with the various certifiers, ideally across the world. Not that easier said than done, I realize, but that's the frame that we operate. We're not a facilitator for brain drain. By that I mean we're not trying to, our link to the ACG in the US is not such that we're encouraging trainees to move to the US. We're not the US ACG. Obviously, we have certain advantages. We learn, we have the luxury of learning from US ACG with 14,000 programs and all this stuff. But we adapt any policies, procedures, methods to our needs. And we're not a government. Lesson 3. Accreditation must be perceived as an added value, as adding value to what you already do at this point. Value, it could be through improving the educational program, fostering innovation and continuous improvement, a system level impact on patient welfare safety, sometimes hard to measure. It could be improved recruitment of trainees, or enhancing training opportunities, networking, faculty recruitment and retention. It could be that excellence or distinction compared to your peers. But we have to have a sense of what that value is for each institution where we engage, and it might be different from one institution for another. Very different, right? Actually, across even the 11 countries where we operate now, very different what value we may add from one place to another. The challenges in demonstrating value is we need research, we need more hard outcomes in terms of graduate performance. Of course, there's external factors. We can have the best plans. It's impacted by things that happen right in the world. COVID being one of the more recent examples. It's challenging when you have multiple certifying authorities, and we want to try to properly leverage the experience of the ACG in the US so we don't reinvent the wheel when it's not necessary. But I will take this opportunity also to note that when we're looking at outcomes, we believe that the future of accreditation is will be dependent even more on measuring outcomes. And part of that, in order to do that properly, we envision that the process of the data that we look at is going to change over the next 10 years. So ACGME is actually in the midst, and ACGMEI are in the midst of a pretty massive investment in infrastructure, IT infrastructure, that is basically going to replace the current ABS system with a more modern platform within the next 3 years. The key potential of that, I mean, there are many. One of them is enhanced data analytics that we can bring to the table. And the analytics, either on the user end or on the ACG end. There may be AI capabilities we can utilize to help us guide us through the accreditation decision process. And then importantly, we believe that the future is that data systems begin to talk to each other. That perhaps data from the NHS system talks to ACGME's I system, data from EMRs. Now, there's a lot of things we have to consider when we go down this path. But data from EMRs talk to accreditation, certifying systems. The future is this data exchange profile, which will allow us to enhance what we do. So we're building our system to anticipate a new system by 2025. We've already started, and some of it's just transparent because you don't see necessarily some of the backbone of our website, for example, changed recently, and we're beginning to build out this. Lesson 4, the continuous improvement function of accreditation is as important, if not more, than the assurance function. I'm not going to get into this in any detail. We've seen groups like this already. The system here is built on the same concept. So I'll leave it at that. The quality improvement function is central to what we do and what we do. And well-functioning programs is more important than the assurance function, especially once you have a program that's been in existence for a period of time. I will mention that construct fits into what we've talked about today about milestones. We've seen how one of the pillars of the quality improvement function can be the milestones functions, among other things. We also have a process where I think you know that our process is built on an annual review of programs based on screening data that we have and doing statistical analyses on what we see. And on the right side of the slide, this concept, you saw that we have institutional accreditation as a first step, with the concept being that that provides the foundation on which all your programs are built. It's incredibly important to focus on the institution first and establish that clinical learning part. Lesson 5, the construct and the process for the development of the accreditation standards is important. Again, we have you've heard about this already, institutional foundation and specialty construct. By the way, part of that construct may not be relevant in UAE, but part of that construct of splitting out all the foundational from the specialty is that we may be able to enter countries that are less well resourced, that have a potential that they can reach to a certain level, but still have work to do before they get specialty accreditation, and we can still help them along their journey to improving their GME functions. We think we want to strive towards a comprehensive and evidence-based system. We want to have balance, right? Balance between uniformity and consistency across regions, but with flexibility to accommodate regional differences in practice and culture. We want to be transparent. All of our program requirements, our policies and procedures, etc., are on the website. Members of our committees are on the website. We have public input. Before we finalize program requirements, they're posted publicly. This first, I forget, 45 or 60 days. And anyone can comment, and the review committee reads every single comment. So if you ever see notifications like that of program requirements, comment, because before they're finalized, that's the time to do it. We also have public members on our review committee, one public member on each committee. Lesson 6, peer review is the key to credibility. So we have a committee of peers who are volunteers. We have diversity by region and specialty. They're responsible for defining the standards and making the accreditation decisions. So any of the staff here do not make the decisions made by the peer review panel. We strive for it to be data-driven. Principle of substantial compliance. We don't seek perfection. There's a strict conflict of interest and confidentiality process. One of the things we can do as an accreditor external to the organization that we're interacting with is that we can insert an impartiality, and we have strict conflict of interest policies on our committees, and we're completely separate from U.S. operations. We have separate review committees, separate board of directors, separate finances, separate. We learn from the ACD and the U.S. From their their successes and their failures. But we have separate operations. Lesson 7. All our partners across the world are seeking even more feedback from us than what we provide in annual reviews. We've only begun down that path of giving you back meaningful data based on what we get. And our goal is to provide more data back to programs. That's part of the reason we're changing the IT infrastructure for our systems. It will help us develop better systems to identify what data is important to you and measure. And then again, benchmark or whatever the case may be, the annual performance data, etc. And benchmark, we may be at a point where benchmarking based on global our global experience may be appropriate. That may not be appropriate for all metrics, obviously, there are differences, but when possible, that's probably a good thing. And we've also learned that site visits are very valuable. In-person site visits are particularly valuable, although we're going to have a system where we have depending on the reason for the site visit, some could be done very efficiently, virtually, some can be done in person. Well, so I'll leave it at that for now. Lesson number 8. I only have 10, so there'll be time for questions, I think, at the end. Our partners want to build communities, so do we. This is one of the major strategic goals for us at ACGMEI over the next years ahead, building community. What does that mean? Part of it, this is what it means. This is literally what it means right here. We don't do it alone, we do it with partners, we do it together, right? But we build a community. This is great. What's better than this? But it could mean a lot of things, right? It's educational community. We hope to launch in the next in the first half of this year, a DIO forum across our ACGMEI institutions, which has been successful in the United States. We want to learn from that and apply it internationally. So we want to bring our international DIOs together periodically, virtually, initially, and then even think about, when appropriate, how to link our community with the ACGME and the US community. When can there be ties there that are helpful to both the parties to build a truly global community? Training program communities. This also relates to training opportunities for our fellows, our residents who may be interested in fellowship, communities of well-being support, resident networks, potentially research. It's one of the things I'd like to see now that we have, if you think about all the institutions we have now and the programs, and you add up all the faculty at all these places, there's talent out there, right? Talent that we can draw and act as a catalyst. ACGMEI could act as a catalyst to bring either faculty together, to provide them potentially come up with research ideas, and when appropriate for us to engage in that, to do it together, and educational opportunities. If we keep doing things like this, you don't want to keep seeing the same people over and over again. It's some of you that I'd like to see up here next time. And we can act as a catalyst. It's not appropriate for us to do everything, we can act as a catalyst. Building community also is about what we have on our websites. The Explore platform is our distance learning platform that's available to our ACGMEI partners. And there's a number of other things I'm not going to mention on our website that we only hope to keep building out, by the way. So I'm not going to push that. I do want to mention that I'm aware that it's certainly on the minds of many of the residents. It's about how the ACGMEI can help facilitate fellowship opportunities, either within the ACGMEI network or in the United States. Our United States program requirements are built so that so that residents in ACGMEI programs are eligible in all disciplines except neurosurgery. We're beginning to accumulate data on movement of residents, what residents have taken advantage of that. Preliminary, I can say that it's actually a pretty wide range of specialties that some resident graduates of ACGMEI programs have done fellowships in the United States, but it's been from a relatively small number of donor institutions. So we have to begin to look at that. It's a little tricky. Ideally, what we really want to do is follow the outcomes of our graduates. But of course, we can't, we have to do that the right way. We don't have a right to follow people everywhere they go. But at the same time, to prospectively, with agreement of everybody of the graduates, to follow, where are they in 5 years after they graduate from an ACGMEI program? It'd be very powerful in a number of domains to figure out either this kind of fellowship opportunities or just figure out what your outcomes as an outcome measure for program performance, right? It's tricky to do though, again, because you have to protect the privacy of folks that they're not under our domain in any way once they graduate. Lesson 9, developing appropriate strategic partnerships is important. Again, evidence of that today. I don't have to say more than that, but we're interested in a lot of potential strategic partnerships, including other organizations in the world that have a stake in postgraduate medical education working together, not competing, but working together. And finally, and I alluded to this earlier, there's inherent tension in the system too, right? It's not easy necessarily to try to be an accreditor in the global domain. You're kind of walking a fine line sometimes. On the one hand, trying to aim for relative uniformity. We do have a U.S. construct to our residency fellowship systems, and competencies are based on ACG, et cetera. Is a recognition of excellence, and we also understand that there's a need for resources, right, to have a high-performing program versus the contrasting domain to uniformity is flexibility. There are other models to the U.S. specialty construct. We look how much we diverge from that. I was mentioning earlier, we actually just approved about to approve two specialty constructs that don't exist in the United States. So it would be unique to ACG MEI because it will serve our community well. And again, recognition of excellence versus improvement, and a need for resources, I think, versus committing to or trying to help an organization find resources. So there's tension in the system, and we try to walk that line all the time. Some decisions are, but that's why we have committee of peers that are trying to do the right thing to help programs go in the right direction. And that really are the lessons that we learned. I did want to just show this slide just this is something I show almost every time, just to show a sense of the scope of what's happening, where we are currently, about how many learners we have in our system currently in programs. We've had a fairly steady, modest growth pattern over the last years, and hope to continue that. When we continue to expand, we have a couple of institutions now who are in the early stages of engaging with us, and we're excited about it, and we're happy with this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Very interesting for Dr. James. I thought that probably somebody would be interested to ask.
Thank you so much, James. James, can you highlight about what's going on with the clinical environment reviews, and is this having equivalence in the ACGMI? Is this happening? And if you may shine some of the light on the NAS, the next accreditation system, what's going on and how it's being involved.
So the first question is about CLEAR, the Clinical Learning Environment Review, which is, if those of you who have followed the evolution of things in the United States, that has been an active program now for about, actually almost 10 years. And so we don't have a similar process here, so I'm not going to describe it in detail. We do look at the clinical learning environment by virtue of our institutional accreditation process. So we have, I don't mean to say that the clinical learning environment is not important, but we don't have the same process in the United States with regard to the clinical learning environment review for a number of reasons. But let me say just briefly, what is the clinical learning environment? It is not a process of accreditation, which is one of the reasons we're not doing it yet in the international arena. It is meant to be a number of things, a formative assessment of the clinical learning environment. So how does the ACGME learn about what's happening in institutions, what the challenges are, and what the metrics around patient safety, et cetera. They do visits that are not linked to accreditation to get really the information about the current state of institutions in domains that are important to public health. Now, the way that it might loop back to accreditation is if the ACGME identifies in aggregate things that seem to be missing. Say they find out that in general, residents across in this case, US, because it's a US function right now, are not learning about how to report patient safety events, or they don't have, they're not involved in root cause analysis, or whatever the case may be. It may inform the ACGME to modify its program requirements so that it can, we can begin to, through program requirement changes, through informed decisions about program requirement changes, begin to move the ball, right, in the right direction, related to patient safety and quality, et cetera. But right now, the way we do it at ACGMEI is sort of the way ACGME in the US used to do it, is through the institution requirements. The second question about NAS, the next accreditation system, is probably now, we still refer to it as NAS, but you can't refer to it as the next forever because eventually it'll be the previous one. We're currently in the NAS now. All programs, the NAS, that's probably this is jargon, right? The prior accreditation, the traditional accreditation system, was mainly an assurance system, first of all, where just you did assessments, did they meet the minimums, and then you gave an accreditation decision for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and at that point in time, you visited the place, everything started all over. The NAS is the more quality improvement model, this annual loop. So we've been there. We started it. We phased it into Singapore some years ago, and phased it into basically everywhere else in the ACGME we made for 2 years. So we're 2 years into it. So now it's not really the NAS, it's just how we do things. We're already thinking, as I alluded to about when I talked about the investments we're making in IT, the infrastructure changes, we're already thinking now about the next accreditation process, which we hope will focus even more on outcomes in a way, again, that's based on data sharing and measuring those things that are really important. We call it the next after the next.
Thank you, coaches. So we are moving to the last presentation by Dr. Sheikh Badr. The presentation will be, actually a workshop for the surveyors experience. Dr. Sheikh Badr is considered one of the pillars of the NIHS. He was actually one of the people who started the work with the NIHS right from the beginning. Experience as a policy development expert. Dr. Sheikh is a physician by background, as well he is expert in health workforce strategy for more than 20 years. He has multiple qualification and education related to community medicine, public health, strategy, and workforce planning from a variety of universities, Sudan and UK, as well as US. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mazar. In fact, our administration asked me to be brief. I will do my best. In fact, the audience for this session, which I'm going to present, is essentially, our audience essentially are the surveyors who had the experience with us over the last period in surveying both institutions and programs. This is the first category. The second category is the potential surveyors, people who are interested to become surveyors. And the third category is all of you at large, people who are interested in knowing about accreditation and what's happening here. So the presentation, actually, I start with some principles which I will quickly go over them. One of the apt definitions for accreditation It's by Frank and colleagues. And I would like just to draw your attention to certain words and concepts, such as accreditation being a process. It's a process, and that denotes a lot. And it's a formal evaluation, and it is based on defined or preset standards. And then it is done by an external body. This is essential to accreditation. And then, as the professor was saying, the presentation that just finished it has a dual purpose: quality assurance and quality improvement or enhancement. So these are the principles within which we function. And then we see it, of course, mainly as a developmental process, as a continuous and not a one-off experience. And then also, it's mostly a qualitative exercise rather than quantitative. Although we try to develop rubrics and measurements, but again, it's mainly a qualitative process. And the human tool is at the heart of accreditation. That's why we consider surveyors as critically important for us. And it's, of course, driven by healthcare safety and effectiveness and guided by ethical underpinnings. I will be echoing a lot on the previous presentation because it's the transparency, accountability, and then the mutual learning, which happens within accreditation. And this, again, importance of accreditation, I think I'll not dwell much. The pillars of accreditation, as we see them, are on one side, the accrediting agency or accrediting body, on the other side, the accreditee, whether institution or program, and then the standards, and then the process. So in terms of the country here, the NIHS has the mandate to accredit residency and fellowship training, and this was clear in this degree of establishment. Our target for accreditation are institutions and programs, as you see, and then our standard development, as Dr. Muhammad has already shown, the underpinnings for developing them. And then our accreditation standards are generally common standards for institutions and programs. And then we have the specialty specific standards. And then we have the umbrella of our rules and regulations in the institute that represent the ultimate reference point, because those are endorsed by the board of directors. This has already been shown, our programs. And these are the general areas for the framework. Also, Dr. Muhammad has shown this. And we have our accreditation process, mainly 3 phases, as per the international experience. This is our process. I will not do it much. Here, the role of accreditation surveyors. What do we expect from our surveyors? In fact, we see them, as I said, as a human tool to support our accreditation system and decision making. And also the role of the surveyors actually cuts across the whole process. It's not only the survey visit or instance of visiting a program or institution, because they work on the application and they work through a process. Also, they provide useful peer opinion to support the institution in its development, and they provide useful feedback for us in the NIHS, also for us to adapt and to develop, because it's a whole of a learning process. And of course, the surveyor can have an important role of coaching a young colleague or a new surveyor. The team usually have 2 to 3 accreditation surveyors. And in fact, in the NIHS here, since we are a new institution and starting, we want to involve as much people as possible for purposes of training and peer review. So we usually have 2 or 3 surveyors, essentially from outside the institution. And in terms of the programs, at least one should be a subject matter expert. The essence of accreditation surveying, as we see it, as I said, it's not only a one-day ad hoc encounter. It's a rather longitudinal process. It's a collaborative process, so the team work. It's a learning process for all, for surveyors, for the institutions, and for us in the NHS. It's dynamic and iterative. It's never a linear process as we experience it. There is dynamicity, there is iteration and continuous learning, and it is a structured process. Also, the survey, I think it's like research. It's something structured and has got certain steps, and its effectiveness rests on good preparations. Again, what we emphasize in the institute, the survey is not just traveling to an institution and just setting on the material, but coming prepared. We have an important concept on which we are working, trying to standardize our surveyor team. And by that we mean the surveying for accreditation is not open to anyone. It should have a requirement, criteria for selecting surveyors, process for application, training requirements, continuous development of surveyors, formal registry of surveyors, and then finally recognition of surveyors. And here, Professor Muhammad Banyas, we are trying to learn from the system in the CAA, where you have an excellent approach of what they call the certified reviewer. So you come across certain amount of training and then you got certified. We are starting in NHS in that direction, and ultimately our system will develop to have all our accreditation surveyors certified, and I think that might contribute even to an international pool of surveyors that could be exchanged with other institutions. So in survey, we have a visit to an institution or program, and that visit has 2 components. We have our surveyors who are peers, colleagues, and we have the NHS support team. And each of them, of course, they work collaboratively as one team, but each has got their role. Now for our support team, we usually convene and orient the surveyors. We communicate the necessary resources with them, provide them with documentation, then we coordinate the logistics of the visit. We have here a good team in NHS, Wafa and other colleagues. And also we witness, of course, the site visit and respond to relevant queries about the institution. And then also we maintain communication with the target institution before, during, and after the visit. And then we support the surveyors in preparing their survey report, which is ultimately submitted to the Central Accreditation Committee. And finally, we provide feedback to the NHS on the whole process. So the survey experience, we divide it in 3 phases. Before the visit, during the visit, and after the visit. What happens before the visit? I think for anyone who would like to become a surveyor, they should pay attention to preparations before the site visit, in terms of getting acquainted with the NHS rules and regulations. And luckily, those are all available on the website in terms of our bylaws, our regulations, and also we stand also ready to clarify for anybody who would like that. And then you have to plan to dedicate yourself to the site visit day, because it's a full day. And also you need to read the application and the accompanying documents. What we have noticed in our experience, this has been variable. Some people become really prepared, and some others, they just rush themselves inside the room. And of course, for us in the NHS, it's easy to distinguish who comes prepared and who just. So this is really important. You need to invest some time in that, and also you need to attend the NHS pre-visit meeting. We have this good habit of organizing a pre-visit meeting with our accreditation surveyors to just coordinate, to communicate, to streamline things. And also you need, as a surveyor team, if you are 2 or 3, you need to divide roles among the surveyors. This is one of our observations during the visit, that sometimes people, the survey team, whether 2 or 3 people, sometimes they appear not well organized in asking questions, sometimes duplicating, sometimes this denotes that there was no prior arrangement among the team. This is one of the important points. And then prepare your notes. This will maximize the use of time when you come prepared with your questions, your critical areas that you would like to discuss. So during the site visit now, when we go to the institution, of course there are simple but important things: arriving on time, and then minding the purpose of accreditation as mainly developmental. So we usually tell the institutions we are not policing them. Of course, we are seeking quality assurance, but the main intention is a developmental process to support the institutions to attain the accreditation status. You need to establish rapport and trust. During most of our visits, there were no problems, but in few occasions, you can see and you can feel that there are some issues of tensions, and I think it's the role of the surveyor team to just alleviate that, to be and then also not to forget to be critical and always triangulate. I think triangulation is an important skill in qualitative research, and I would argue that it's one of the skills that are actually needed in surveying, because you are meeting different people, you are having various instances and occasions, and you need to triangulate and try to be critical. You need to take the lead and manage the conversation, and this is very important. As surveyors, we need to maximize the time with the institution, so if there are any distractions, the surveyors need to have the skill of managing the time and conversation. And also, you need to mind the difference between institutional and program accreditation. In context of specialty education, as per the international practice, and as you all know, it's institutional and program accreditation. And each one of them has got a purpose. Sometimes in our experience, we see surveyors mixing, jumping from this into this, and this sometimes creates confusion to institutions. And also you need to observe time management and avoid any areas of conflict. Also during the site visit, the site tour is an important component, and it needs to be guided by purpose. The site tour is not just a general tour into the hospital or the health facility. It should be guided by purpose, and that's clear in the accreditation requirements. And it is main objective is to verify what is reported, what is written in the document. So if we can't verify through the site visit, and I think we should be keeping a focus on that. And also, our main intention is to focus on the education setup and environment within the institution, and again, to try and relate the evidence from different sources. One of the important things during the site visit is carefully managing the exit meeting. Sometimes we do a very good survey, and we spend a very good time in the institutions, but when we come to manage our exit, then some confusion happens here. This needs to be carefully managed, and we need to pay attention to the purpose, being concise in reflecting with the institutions and clarifying, asking for missing or additional documents, highlighting discrepancies, and avoiding, of course, communicating a decision to the institution. And I think this is one of the basic things in accreditation survey as general. Now the last step, which is after the site visit, it's very important to combine the surveyor's comments, judgment, then to reach a consensus among surveyors, and then there is no hazard at all in contacting the institution even after you leave it if there are remaining issues. It's better to do this than to go and present to a committee on wrong assumptions or something that's not clear. So it's allowed to do this even after finishing the visit. Then the final joint report should be submitted in our format, including overall reflections. We usually reflect on the strengths, the areas for development in the institution, and we also mention essential citations, areas that included in our standards that are not met or partially met. And then also we have the recommendations for improvement, areas that we see that the institution is doing well, but they might need to further improve. And then we include the recommendation for accreditation decision. The surveyors should ultimately recommend an accreditation decision, because that will be presented to a committee. Then we expect also the surveyors after the visit also to provide us as NIHS any feedback, reflections, observations, recommendations. And in our experience, this has really been very useful. I think some of you, when they reflected to us after the visit, that has helped us, and Dr. Muhammad knows this, to go back to our standards and address some areas. And that's natural, because it's a learning process, and we don't have, it's not Quran. This is, then after the site visit, then there is a very important step. Our surveyors report back to the Central Accreditation Committee, which is a major decision-making organ in our institution. We ask the surveyors, or one of them, to attend the committee meeting to present. And also, we alert our surveyors that when you present to a committee, you are presenting on behalf of a team. So avoid to present your personal impression. And sometimes that has created us problems. When you present, you represent the team. So you just present the agreed results. And communicate the agreed recommendation and not the individual judgment. As I said, respond to committee clarifications if they have, and then do not vote against the survey recommendation. And this is, I think it's odd, but we need to alert our surveyors, not at all to vote against the consensus of your team of surveyors, if you are a member of the Central Accreditation Committee. Just this, I will just browse through these, because these are just illustrative examples. We have our tools, we have the program accreditation survey agenda for the day, and this we have our survey accreditation forms that you all know as surveyors. And we have, these are details. For example, this is an agenda for meeting with the program director where we go for programs, and then meeting with the head of department. We have guidelines for each of our meetings, meeting with residents and fellows. These are the points that you can just ask. I think the time will not allow to go in details over these. And then meeting with faculty. And then at the end of the survey, this is a reporting card we created in the institute, a reporting card for the surveyors to help the surveyors to structure their reports for presentation in front of the Central Accreditation Committee. One of the lessons, I would just like to focus briefly on it. During our survey, survey experience, we noticed that sometimes difficult situations arise. And in that case, as surveyor, you need to have tactics and you need to have skills to deal with this. For example, one of them is the host dominance. Sometimes you visit a place and instead of us as surveyors taking the lead in the discussion, you find the host taking you away and presenting their achievements, and they consume a lot of time in this. So if you act in a mild way, you might be in trouble because you lose time. So you need to have the skills of politely taking the lead and directing the direction, never losing control. Because as surveyors, these sessions are intended for us. Controlling interviews is also very important. Sometimes in interviewing, and as we know in qualitative research, the area of interview skills is the whole area where you need to have skills, how to deal with a person when you are interviewing and controlling the interview. Addressing inertia is an important area where we notice. Sometimes we have a group of residents, for example, and they just go silent. And they mention the positive things, mainly focus on the positive things. I mean, this is understandable, but also as a surveyor, your role is to try to build rapport, to build trust, to present it in a way to make people come up. For example, we are not seeking weaknesses in institutions, but we might ask the residents to ask them if you would like your program to further improve. What would you suggest for the program? Then framing the question in that way will allow them to just come forward and rather than asking them about the weaknesses in the program. So this aspect of inertia is it also needs to be addressed. Disagreement among surveyors. This can happen in certain areas. Some people might think this is a citation. Some person saying is an area for improvement. We mention it, not to mention it. I think this is natural and can happen, but we usually, as NIHS team, our role comes here to support the surveyors in reaching a consensus. Of course, the process is participative and democratic, but we are not aiming for voting among surveyors. We are more aiming for consensus if you are 2 or 3 surveyors. Managing and dealing with adverse events in rare situations that happens. Also, we need to be careful and we need to be accommodative as surveyors. If we see any frustrations in the environment, in the area, and that happens sometime, we need to be diligent, but also we need to be polite in trying to address this, because the whole process is a sort of collegial visit. And then finally, the ethical dilemmas. The ethical dilemmas usually arises in accreditation, and we have seen that during the site visit and even during the committee meetings. I think one of the most important dimensions, as per our experience, is confidentiality. We ask all our surveyors to be diligent on this and to observe confidentiality. What you report, what you discuss should remain confidential until the final decision is taken and communicated back to the institution. Because the price of breaching this is complicating the process. And we don't want to go into details, but we think this is an important area for us. The accreditation decision, of course, the surveyor is part of our accreditation decision, but is not the only, the survey team is not the only factor in accreditation decision. You report to the committee. We have a central accreditation committee, which is constitutionally established within the institute, and the committee recommends, actually even the committee has not the final decision. The final decision, because it's a legal responsibility, the final decision is institution. The institution head should issue the final decision because it's a legal responsibility. But the committee recommends. And then we have the appeal against the decision is open. And in our experience, we experienced this and we treated it in a very objective manner, accepting the appeals and then revising, and then even if it necessitates that we adjust the decision. So we take it in a very positive way. It's never, so because this will, this is, I think, will send a message to all institutions that the whole accreditation process is a transparent process whereby we reach a final decision that's accepted and agreed by all, including the applying institution. So the revision process, if decided by the NHS, can involve engagement of the survey team. As surveyors, we might ask you again to get engaged in an institutional application if there is an appeal. This is just a format of our accreditation decision letter, which is sent by the Secretary General to institutions, and we have a comprehensive letter where we explain to the institutions it's not just a short decision being accredited or not, but it includes explanation because we think that accreditation is developmental, and we have our accreditation certificate. Reasons for institution and program survey, this has already been addressed, and again, this is a call for our surveyors, as Dr. Muhammad has shown you this. I think we would like to appeal to you here, those who are attending in room and those who are online. We want to appeal for more people to apply to us because we would like to broaden our survey base